and welcome to the April meeting of the Local Planning Agency Board for Pinellas County, Florida. Today's public hearing by the Local Planning Agency, or LPA, is being held to review a land use plan amendment request and other items relative to the county's planning and growth management program. The Local Planning Agency is an independent advisory board charged with reviewing and making a recommendation to the Pinellas County Board of County Commissioners on cases to be heard today. The Board of County Commissioners will make a final decision on each item at a separate public hearing currently scheduled to be held on May the 20th, 2025 at 6 p.m. with the BCC meeting being held at 333 Chestnut Street in the Palm Room. So for procedures today, staff will make a brief presentation not to exceed 20 minutes. The applicant will then present their case, again not to exceed 20 minutes. We'll then hear from proponents who will be given 3 minutes to speak each unless representing a group of 5 or more, in which case they will have 10 minutes to speak. In order to get the 10 minutes, non-speakers must be present and waive their time. We will then hear from opponents who likewise will have 3 minutes to speak each unless representing a group of 5 or more. And again, non-speakers must be present and waive their time in order to get the 10 minutes. And finally, the applicant will be given the opportunity to close, answer questions, or respond to any comments raised by the opponents or proponents for a period of time not to exceed 5 minutes. Before your presentation, please give your name and address for the record. All testimony needs to be under oath, so if you have not been sworn in already and you plan to testify, please rise now and be sworn. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone? All right, seeing none. Also, please fill out the slip on the table and present it to the clerk before you speak. There will not be continuing rebuttal, so please try to present all information and concerns while you are at the podium. If you're planning to provide letters, written comments, studies, or other documents in response to the LPA's findings and recommendations, those must be received by the zoning section 15 days prior to the Board of County Commissioners meeting in order to be included with the record that will be transmitted to the Board of County Commissioners. So with that, we will move into our agenda. The next item is item 2, approval of the minutes for the March 12th, 2025 LPA hearing. Do I have any discussion on the minutes from March 12th, 2025? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion on those minutes.
So move.
Moved by Laurie Johnson.
Second?
Second by Hamilton.
Yes.
Sorry.
No problem.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. The motion passes unanimously. At this time, would our board counsel like to make a statement about, a quasi-judicial statement about any of the hearings today?
Sure. Joe Morse, the Assistant County Attorney. The zoning matters heard by the local planning agency are quasi-judicial in nature. Please note that only competent, substantial, fact-based testimony or evidence may be considered by the board during deciding matters before it. Pure speculation or opinion not based on competent facts cannot be considered by the board. Lay testimony with fact support, including but not limited to meeting minutes, surveys, engineering reports, etc., may be considered competent, substantial evidence. The county attorney's office represents and advises the board, and county staff cannot give legal advice to the applicant or other interested parties.
All right. Thank you, Council Morrissey. And with that, we'll proceed to item 3A1, FLU 25-01, Mila Mania Properties Incorporated. Staff, you may proceed when ready.
Hi, good morning. Scott Swearingen from Planning will be presenting this case.
Morning,
Good
Mr.
morning,
Swearingen.
Madam Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the local planning agency. My name is Scott Swearingen, and I'm the long-range planner with Pinellas County. It's a pleasure to be before you, and I respect your time, so I'll jump right in. The case before you is FLU 2501, and it is a land use case. No quasi-judicial cases today. I usually present the legislative cases, so I'll present this one and move forward with it. It is at, the address is 4500 40th Street North in Lealman. It's at the northwest quadrant or northwest intersection of 40th Street North and 45th Avenue North. The land use currently is residential urban, and the request before you today is for a change to residential medium, and that's on the future land use map. The zoning is R4, that's 1, 2, and 3 family residential district, and there is no zoning change proposed today, so there's no quasi-judicial matter before us. Currently on the property exists 2 dwelling units and some ancillary uses like garage space and whatnot. The applicant has expressed their intent to, with the approval of land use, to build 3 dwelling units, so to add an additional dwelling unit. Just to let you know, for this case, we reviewed land use, so it's a future land use map amendment. We don't take consideration into what the developer's desire or their proposal is as far as moving forward into the development. There's no application that's active, and even if there were, it's really not a part of our purview in reviewing this with our statutory requirements for review and our county requirements for review. It's simply a land use matter for review. Madam Chair.
On that note, so we have some concept plans and such. There's no are you saying there's no development application or conditional development agreement application or conditional overlay that would make any of these concept plans binding?
To my knowledge, there is no application that's been submitted.
No, so these are just exhibits of what could potentially be developed. There's no development agreement, so they are not binding in any way.
Thank you very much.
And I just add, even if there were, that would not be a part of our review and our recommendation on a land use case. That would go to zoning or to site plan review or where development agreements are reviewed there too. This is just future land use, so just to kind of box that in and couch that for us today. So and again, the proposals to go from residential urban to residential medium, and I'll note that this is also in the Lealman Community Redevelopment Area, the unincorporated county's one and only CRA. Outlined in red is a subject property at that northwest corner of 40th Street North and 45th Avenue North. And in the neighborhood surrounding it is a mix of residential, from single-family residential, duplexes, triplexes, and the like. And you can see on the map on your left the current land use, residential urban, and the properties, the land use of the properties that surround the subject property within the neighborhood. And then the proposed land use map would change. That shows that on the right, and that would change the land use to residential medium for that subject property. And the subject property is 0.1 or 21 acres. Apologize, should have said that before. Again, the zoning is R4. You can see most of all immediate surrounding property is zoned R4, and most of the neighborhood is zoned R4 with some variations there too. This is a photo of the site. This is looking north on its 45th Avenue North frontage. So it's kind of north, a little bit northeast. You can start to see the corner of 40th Street North there. You can see that single-family dwelling attached to an additional building, which has the other unit, the second unit that's on the second floor, and then the garage spaces on the ground floor. And so this is the property frontage view on 40th Avenue North, generally looking to the west, kind of west-southwest, so you can see how it wraps that corner. This is the neighborhood along 45th Avenue North, immediately to the west. So the subject property is really, if you're looking at the photo, it's at your shoulder on the right. And so, I'm sorry, looking to the east. I apologize, not looking to the west. So you can see looking to the east. This is kind of at the 40th Street North intersection, looking eastward. And then conversely, looking to the west with the subject property immediately on the right of that photo. This just gives you a general flare of 45th Avenue North and generally kind of the neighborhood. So current land use, residential urban, RU, it allows, and so in the future land use categories, they tend to be broad, and what kind of uses are allowed on the property. And then the zoning kind of gets down into the specifics of the specific building types, like a duplex, a single family, multifamily, whatnot. So land use in RU is residential, institutional, recreation, open space is generally kind of the uses that are the primary uses that are identified in the future land use. And then as well as office, personal service, some limited retail commercial as well. Those are permitted in certain instances with limitations. So with acreage size limitations or locational limitations there too. So there are other uses that could be built as well, but there are a lot of limitations that are on that. And of course there's the zoning that would limit that too. So our comprehensive plan notes that RU is generally appropriate between major employment centers and community regional shopping centers in areas where the use and development characteristics are urban in nature. So kind of more in for that residential urban type of density that's permitted. So it'd be for similar properties like that. I think that goes without saying, but we do state that in our comp plan. And also an area serving as a transition between more suburban areas and more urban residential areas. So kind of like transition space. 7.5 residential dwelling units per acre is the maximum permitted density in the RU designation, and a 0.4 FAR floor area ratio for non-residential uses. The proposed RM, residential medium land use designation, pretty much similar in how uses that are identified as primary uses and uses that could also be built under certain circumstances, from residential, institutional, recreational open space, and then perhaps the ability as well under certain circumstances to do more personal service, office support, some limited retail like neighborhood retail, that kind of thing. And the comp plan notes that this designation is generally appropriate in close proximity to major employment centers and community and regional shopping centers, as well as in areas where use and development characteristics are medium density and residential in nature. As a transition between kind of less urban and more urban and or mixed use areas, and finally in close proximity, and that may have direct access from an arterial or a throughway, like a thoroughfare highway, like those kind of busier roadways and on that roadway network, so within close proximity to those. The density permitted under the RM land use is 15 dwelling units per acre, with a floor area ratio for non-residential uses up to 0.5. So those are the two land uses. That's the one current and the one proposed. So just real quick on the zoning, the R4 zoning, as I mentioned. So all surrounding property in the neighborhood is R4, and then the majority of the neighborhood, with some exceptions, are mostly R4 residential. And there is no change in zoning, but just give you kind of a sense of the character, kind of plays us through. R4 allows a range of single-family type residential. So single-family units, duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, those types of units are generally permitted and are the nature of the R4 district. And then it also allows, in limited circumstances, some non-residential uses like daycare centers, schools, places of worship, whatnot. Have to go through a bit of a process to get that done, including a public hearing and review. The public gets to take a look at that as well. It does not allow retail, commercial, personal services, kind of the more, maybe you'd call more intense non-residential uses, right? So it doesn't allow those. And a maximum building height of 35 feet. That's the zoning that is in play, and that's the zoning that would remain the same. So it's not a part of this land use case. So our impacts as they go, as we measure our impacts, from a land use perspective, we're looking at a density increase of 7.5 dwelling units per acre. On the property itself, the property is 0.21 acres in size. It would amount to, instead of currently where 2 residential units are permitted on the property based on the current land use, an additional residential unit for a total of 3 residential units would be permitted on the property with the change in land use. Traffic impacts amount to about 7.2 additional trips per day. That's on the average annual daily trip counts for, that we go to through our trip count measures. This is outside the coastal high hazard area and the coastal storm area. It's in flood zone X, and it is outside the 500-year floodplain and in a non-evacuation zone. So the area is mostly high and dry. Our land use recommendation for the proposed land use amendment from RU to RM. We note that the land use change to RM is inappropriate for the subject property in our professional opinion and for the surrounding area. It would create an isolated 0.21 acre RM designation that's completely surrounded by RU from a residential urban neighborhood, by and large. The nearest RM designated property is just under a quarter mile away. It's about 1,250 feet, not to be so specific, but approximately that distance to the west. It would amount to a 100% increase in density from 7.5 dwelling units per acre to 15 dwelling units per acre. Properties, while we look at this individual property for this case, when we're looking at land use, we're also considering the land use implications of, if properties were combined, if properties were divided. So, in essence, it allows up to 15 dwelling units per acre in an area that's pretty much designated and limited at 7.5 dwelling units per acre. Note as well that we have a countywide land use map. We have a countywide planning authority. So while we deal with unincorporated county, let's call it like the 20,000 foot level, right? We have kind of a 50,000 foot level countywide plan map that we also have to be in compliance with as well. The county is required to be in compliance with that map. The change to residential medium to RM on our map would make us incompliant with the countywide map. Now, that's not entirely uncommon. From time to time, when we make land use changes, when we, or not, I should say we, I don't make the changes. When the board of county commissioners approves a land use change, from time to time, there's also need to go to our countywide planning authority vis-a-vis for Pinellas and have a countywide plan map amendment. So I just note that this would also, if the board of county commissioners were to approve this, then it would go through a process to be reviewed by Forward Pinellas and ultimately decided by our countywide planning authority to determine if this indeed goes to that next step. And it's a lot. I can unpack it a little bit if you had any questions about that. Overall, planning staff recommends denial of the proposal for the reasons that I mentioned. This is scheduled for a Board of County Commissioners meeting on May 20th, 2025, and that is a 6 p.m. agenda meeting under the public hearings. That wraps up my presentation, and I'd be happy to try and answer any questions you might have there too. Otherwise, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you. Board members, do you have any questions for staff at this time?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay, Commissioner.
Good morning. How are
Good
you,
morning.
Scott?
I'm good, thank you.
Good. Thank you for clarifying a little bit about that next step to countywide planning map amendment. Is this unusual? Let's say we approve this and then it had to go to that next level. Is it unusual that decisions need to go to that next level?
I would not
before
call it
Pinellas?
unusual, no.
Okay. So it's something that happens on sort of a semi-regular basis?
Yes, I think that would be a good way of characterizing it.
And what would you say are the chances of it being approved then? I mean, just historically.
Well, the way I would answer that is I believe that the countywide planning authority reviews their map amendment requests similar to the way we do for unincorporated county and for the municipalities. Now, I'm reviewing it under more specific statutory requirements, whereas the countywide planning authority would be reviewing it in addition to their own countywide rules that they have. In summary, I believe that they would review their amendment to the countywide plan map similar to the way we would and note similar findings. I don't know that that's true. That is, I'll just say that's speculative on my part.
Okay.
So
when you said that this particular property would be the only one of its kind in the local area, you had to go a quarter of a mile or so before you found this land use somewhere else. Was that a negative when you made the decision to recommend denial?
that would be the primary reason for our recommendation of denial, is because of the land, again, the land use makeup of the neighborhood, the immediate surrounding properties, and the distance from this property to the nearest residential medium property. That's really the primary reason for our recommendation of denial. That's correct.
Okay. I think that's all I have on this for now. I have a couple of other questions, but I think they'll probably apply more to the applicant. Thank you.
Board members, any other questions? All right. Just dovetailing off of Board Member Larry Johnson's question, it sounds like you're considering this to be the future land use map equivalent of spot zoning? Am I right in?
So that would be, I think that's a good analogy. If it were a zoning case, that would be, there's an art of phrase that isn't entirely defined, but is kind of understood in the planning world to be, that would be considered like if this were zoning, I would call that a spot zoning. And then land use is somewhat similar. Again, it's a little bit higher level, it's a little broader in its application. So, you tend to look a little bit further out, in your analysis and whatnot. But I think that would be a fair way of.
Just trying to
Analysis.
understand where staff's head space is on this, so.
Yeah, I think that would be spot land use. Well, that's not a term that I've seen defined specifically in kind of land use law and also in in any of the land use material that I read. But that would be analogous.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you for that insight. Board members, any other questions for staff? All right, in that case, please take a seat and we'll hear
Thank
from
you.
the
Thank you,
applicant.
Madam Chair.
At this time, we will hear from the applicant.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, so I put together a PowerPoint presentation and then
Before
12.
you proceed,
Oh,
would you
sorry.
please give us your name and
Oh,
address?
yeah, sorry. Mila Ortiz, sole owner of Mila Mania Properties. And Mila Mania Properties is the sole owner of what I call the Purple Monster.
All right, thank you.
Right. Okay, so I had put together this PowerPoint presentation, and then 12 hours later, I received the LPA staff report that was just presented. And so I made these handouts in response to the staff report, so I kind of want to focus on the handouts first, and then if we have time, maybe some slides within my PowerPoint presentation, if that's okay. Okay, so currently what I'm trying to do is 3 units, as he said. The house would be 1 unit, the second floor would be 1 unit, and the bottom 4 garages would be converted into 1 unit. Those garages are almost the size of fire truck garages. They're not normal sizes. I've looked into trying to replace the doors, and it all has to be custom. It's not normal. With all that space, there's 1,200 square feet in those 4 bay garages, and of course 1,200 square feet in the second floor. It's just conducive for a living unit, specifically either a 3-2 or a 2-2. And so that's where kind of the idea came from. A little 30 seconds for the neighbors here about me. I am local. I was born here in Tampa Bay, did my undergrad at Eckerd College, grad school at UT. Since then, I have not left Pinellas County. I worked at Catalent for a while off of Roosevelt Boulevard, and Smith & Nephew, which was pretty big here for a long time until they moved to Texas. But I was there for over 10 years. I've shifted gears out of the medical world and into construction. I'm currently getting my GC license. I just passed the first exam. I've got 2 more to go. And then I did receive the Minority Business Enterprise certificate, so I am, celebrating that we just got awarded a bid to build fire stations. So I'm very much involved in the community, and this is one of my passion projects, is to create middle-class housing, and I want to start in Pinellas County. I want to buy buildings that people essentially have given up on and revitalize. I am totally against demoing. It's terrible for the community and terrible for the environment. I do want to look into vacant lands, and I want to build tiny homes, but tiny homes from the retrospect of 1,000 square feet, so more like smart homes. So that's the overall arching goal, and this was a very odd building, and because it was odd, I loved it. So again, looking at those 4 garages, I want to create that as that 3rd unit. Directing your attention to the first handout. The first part, the top part, is a chart that was in the LPA staff report. Now, I have added 2 columns to the right of it, and they are in color. Oops. Oh, sure. Oh, okay. There you go. So what they labeled this table to be is surrounding zoning and land use facts. And so what they've said is that the subject property, the existing use was a duplex, and in actuality, when I bought it, the previous owner had used it as a quadplex, and for a small period of time, they used it as a 5-plex. The property north of me is in fact a duplex, so that is correct. The property south of me is not a duplex. There's 11 homes in that property. The property east of me, and I'm thinking they meant southeast, is actually a triplex. The property immediately east of me is a single family, so I don't know which one they were referring to. And then west of me is actually a triplex as well. So this, and then next to that, I've put in parcel sizes. Our parcel sizes are all over the map, and this is not just within my block. It is all over UPC. So for my first point, I guess, is to label everyone RU with all the varying sizes that exist is kind of an oversight there that I think we should really examine. I know that we are here to talk about my subject property, but it's fair to talk about the future of all the properties around me that are kind of bizarre as well. So I would ask that the committee consider parcel sizes in this consideration. And then secondly, I had a chance to sit with the previous owner and talk a little more about the history of it and how it just became abandoned. What they had told me is that they were using it at the time as a 4-plex, and then the building was old. I mean, it's 1954 construction. They wanted to remodel, revamp it. They applied for a full renovation permit for 4 units, and in that review, the county denied the permit and said, no, you are a legally non-conforming property. You can only renovate 2 units. And so they did the math, and of course, to renovate such a large building and house for a duplex, the investment did not outweigh the amount of return they could have gotten from a duplex. And so they abandoned the entire building as a whole, and they lived in the house until it was unlivable. And so when I bought it, I mean, it was unlivable. So with that story, I looked into neighbors around me, and there are 7 legally non-conforming properties just within walking distance of my property. And I've highlighted them in red. And they're legally non-conforming only because they are RU. If they were RM, they would be fine. I would also say that I don't know if it was this committee or someone else, but I know that, you know, the housing strategies for Pinellas County, the Lealman CRA, you know, all of these plans for the neighborhoods and county as a whole is to increase housing. We do have, and this is where I'll probably go back to my slide here. We have companies, as you know, that are pouring into Pinellas County. I just read the good news, Foot Locker's coming here from New York City. I did look into the Florida Commerce. There was a issue that was published in July 24. Talked about how 181,000 people who work in Pinellas County live somewhere else. And I am one of those people. I am not living somewhere else because I want to. I am living somewhere else because I can't find middle-class housing that I can afford that's decent and in a safe neighborhood. There is also an outlay of people where people who are living here are also working elsewhere. But what I found interesting about this article was that Pinellas was ranked one of the highest counties in which people are not living here, or are working here but not living here. And so I'm sure that if not this committee, but some other are looking into bringing these two Venn diagrams into one circle and trying to provide housing for people around us. I did see that R5CO, which is a triangular lot that is within walking distance of my property, that has undergone, I think, a review, and they have made changes for that property to satisfy a Habitat for Humanity development project. They're adding 17 units to that property, and this again is within 300 feet of my property. So I'm hopeful that the committee is open for changes as they were for that unit or for that property. The back of this, I listed goals and housing strategies and objectives. They're listed in the Pinellas Comp Plan. Everything in green, I would say, supports what my request is. The three red is what the LPA staff report had listed. What I thought was kind of bizarre was that the objectives and the goals that these policies pertain to was almost written by two different people. Because the objective above says to respond to unique challenges of infill and redevelopment within UPC. But then the policy right underneath, it says that, you know, we're going to be consistent with a countrywide, you know, plan map. So such a flexible term to then follow it by a rigid rule. But yeah, this neighborhood, this entire area of St. Pete is all over the map. It has history of commercial use, and so it's trying to now look like a residential neighborhood, and the parcels aren't cut in this fashion. So it's just a waste of space. I mean, even if the board says, no, you can't have this, I have to look for other ways. I mean, there's a policy, an FLU policy that says consider creative regulatory solutions to support redevelopment. So I'll look for other ways to try to get this to be a third unit. If not, I'm building a 5-bedroom, 3-bath house that probably doesn't belong in this neighborhood. But you know, garages aren't going to pay for the investment of getting this piece of property up to date. So I have to turn it into living space regardless. Many have told me that you're just going to have to Airbnb until, which is, you know, nails on a chalkboard for me. I hate Airbnbs, but that's the only way to support an investment to get this building up to par. The site plan. So I know that was one of the things that was mentioned as one of the concerns for the DRC meeting. They said that they didn't know if it would follow zoning requirements. And so I sat down with my architect, I sat down with right-of-way across the street, I sat down with zoning, and they just, they helped me understand the rules. And so with my architect there, we drafted a proposed site plan, and I know it's super small, so on the back, I've actually blown up parts of the picture so that we can see actual measurements and such. And then I did create a slide that kind of helps us go through this. So one of the rules is that there needs to be at least 4.5 spaces associated with a triplex. And so in this proposed site plan, you'll see that we can accomplish that. We can accomplish 5 spaces. Zoning cautioned that 25% needs to be impervious surface. So in this site plan, 25.07% is impervious. And I can increase that, but I'm just really bad at lawn care. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but I am going to live in this property as well. But yes, I'm very bad at lawn care, so I'm not trying to. But I can increase that if there's a preference there. No more than 30 feet of driveway per side. So since this is a corner property, it has 45th Avenue and it has 40th Street North. So I can put technically 30 feet of driveway on each side of the building. I've only put 30 feet on one side and 20 feet on the other. Another rule was that the flares of the driveway need to be 5 by 5. That was met in this proposed drawing. And then concrete pour must be 3 feet from the neighbor's property line, and that too was met. I guess I'll go to my final thoughts. If an RM designation is not possible or appropriate, then yeah, I'm gonna ask or follow up with the question, what is? I can't create a second unit without bringing the entire building up to code, right? I can't pull a permit, and they're not gonna let me just focus on the second floor without putting rebar into the entire building, pouring concrete every 8 feet. Like, I have to bring everything back up to par. So garages don't really pay for that. There's no market in this neighborhood for a 3.5, but I'm going to do it anyway if there is no other option. So I'll have to get creative with that. 2 rental incomes from a 3.2 will not support the construction needed to get this entire building up to code. Myself and probably my neighbors really don't want Airbnb, but if that's my only resort, then I will do it. But the goal is to turn every square inch of this existing footprint into middle-class, affordable, and long-term housing for the increasing density occurring in Pinellas County. What route achieves this and can later be duplicated for my fellow neighbors, for all of these people here that are also in non-conforming properties? We are within 10 miles of 1,800 new jobs. So I actually did look into that, look into the corporate climate report of all the jobs that came into Pinellas County in 2024. There was 2,600 new jobs, and 1,800 of them are just within 10 miles of this property. So I have no doubt that housing is needed and will be used. Going back to the front of the page here, I did some math, and just looking at the non-conforming properties around me, if we remain RU, and if they undergo what my previous owners had gone through, which is the building was decaying, they needed to fully renovate, which I'm sure all of these properties will eventually get to that point. If they go to the county and try to pull a permit, we're gonna lose just 16 homes within my walking distance, because they're gonna meet the same fate that my previous owner did. The 2 vacant lots that exist here, I've notated them. I actually know the owner of this lot, and he's waiting on the results of this to decide whether he's going to sell or if he's going to build. But yeah, he has 17,000 square feet, and it's just, he's like, what am I going to do? Do 3 units and 12 parking spaces? You know, there's plenty of space for more. If the 7, let's say, if the 7 legally non-conforming parcels apply to get approved for RM, we will only lose 4 homes, right? That 11-plex that's right in front of me, even with an RM designation, he will lose, or she will lose 4 homes, because the most that property will be allowed is 7 homes. So even with an RM designation, it's not going to correct everything, but it will help keep a lot of the homes within this community. The vacant and undeveloped land, assuming RM, can provide 7 new homes, so the net gain is 3 homes, which is probably not enough either for the 1,800 jobs that are within 10 miles of this property. So with that, I know that was a lot, but any questions?
All right, board members, any questions for the applicant?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Board Member Larry Johnson.
Thank you very much for your report, Ms. Ortiz. It was very comprehensive, and I appreciate the time that you've obviously put into it to give us these details. I have a number of questions that I just, and some of these may be for staff as well. You mentioned an exception for, well, first of all, what exactly is legally non-conforming? This is a staff question, I'm sure.
So legally non-conforming means that it was established prior to zoning regulations, and we can trace back, and there's evidence provided, usually permits or other business tax receipts, water bills, other things, utility bills that can provide that say this use was established before the zoning was in place. So like for this property, why all those garages are there is there was a legally non-conforming, there was an auto repair business. So that's why there's the 4 large garages. Is there was a, and then that was abandoned, so that went away. A lot of these other homes, I don't see where some of the properties around there have legal non-conforming uses on them. Again, if you have a legal non-conforming, you can do maintenance and repair. So you can continue if you have to put a new roof on, you have to secure your structure, you have to have that. But it has to be a legal non-conforming. We have to have evidence that proves that it was done before zoning regulations were in place.
Okay, so that obviously prevents you from saying you have to tear this building down and build to the new land use. Obviously, you know, you're sort of grandfathering in these older buildings.
Yeah, unless it's been abandoned. If there's evidence it's been abandoned more than 180 days, then they would have to conform to today's requirements completely.
Okay, and has your property been abandoned for longer than 180 days?
Technically, there's always been somebody living in the house portion. So
I guess that would be a no then?
I guess a no, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, somebody doesn't have to be even living for it to consider it abandoned if, as long as there's activity, somebody's upkeeping the property, they're paying their utility bills on there. We also look at things that if a property goes into foreclosure, when it's in that period of you know, somebody's out of the house and there's discussion with that, we don't count that period as part of the non-conforming as well. I just dealt with that on a similar property, which was a situation we had to look at because it was in foreclosure for a long time, so.
There was a mention of the exception for Habitat for Humanity, R5-CO. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? I don't know which one of you needs to, probably the staff, obviously. And that that created 17 units on a piece of a parcel that was not
Yes, that's
rated
to,
for that large of,
that's to the to the north, up to the northeast along 46th Avenue North, triangular-shaped property. It was formerly a mobile home park that went into, disrepair. That was removed. The county acquired the property. We had it amended to the R5, which is like an infill type of zoning, which allows single-family, duplex, triplex, townhomes, apartments, so a wide range on smaller lot sizes. The conditional overlay was to respond to, neighborhood compatibility on that. They got approval, and recently it is, I think Habitat, and they are currently in for review of site plan to develop that with the 17 attached units.
So nothing's been built on the property?
Nothing has been built yet, that they've been through site plan review for a while now. Is it approved?
They're wrapping up pretty soon.
Yeah, it's been through a couple rounds.
I
It should be
remember
done.
that, yeah. Thank you. So, obviously, the land use rules as they stand now, certainly would favor improving property that is, obviously in disrepair, and adding more housing that would be affordable, which I know is one of the goals that we have in our overall plan. And so it seems to me that the choice here is improve and possibly gain a unit that might be affordable to someone who is working some of those jobs you mentioned, or to not improve and then the property would stagnate, which is a great goal, except it has to fit into, obviously the land use regulations. I guess I'm asking, are there other exceptions that have not been considered? Like ADU or, I'm throwing that out, I don't even know if that applies, but.
Yes, the ADU applies for single-family detached, so one
Has to be
unit.
detached.
If they get an ADU, then, that's 2 units. They currently have 2 units as a duplex, so it wouldn't apply in this case. We had looked at, I know previously it had been looked at, if the multiple units on the property above the 2 were legally non-conforming, and there was no evidence that they were legally established when they turned it into, it's a quadplex, those units, they didn't get approval, for that at the time.
So that second story?
The building is approved, but when they divided it up into additional units, there was no approval process for that. So the only mechanism to reach 3 units would be a land use amendment. So, yeah, we've gone through this and looked.
Okay.
I did get told if I separated the home, I could get an ADU, but that was just a comment thrown out there. I don't even remember where it was, either zoning or.
I don't think
Right,
this
wait.
property could be subdivided
Yeah.
and meet zoning
But-
district standards.
Yeah, this house is completely attached to this building, which wasn't before when it was initially built, I think, back in the 50s or 60s. Somebody decided to just connect this house to that building.
How is it connected? Can you actually get from one part to the other part?
No.
Or do you have to go outside and go
You have
upstairs?
to go outside and around,
So it's just it's just,
yeah,
built right.
the house used to end right where the front door is. And then what my neighbors have told me is that in the 80s, the owner decided that he wanted more square footage, and so he poured a slab and just did a very gypsy type of construction over to the building. And so the building's wall is also the house's wall. And so the previous owner was telling me that they had a bunch of GCs come by and say, well, I'm going to separate this home because that's the only way to do threeplex, in this situation. But that was kind of, that's a headache. But the block was it was done poorly. So I had to, under a full renovation permit, I had to fix that block that is connecting to the garage. Because it was just done, everything was done poorly, and even the slab was just off. Like, there was a literal step inside of the house. So, it was, but it's all corrected now.
So I think hopefully my last question is, there are 3 family residential units in this area right now, triplexes?
Yes.
Okay. So this is really just based on the lot size?
Right, and yeah, like the property directly to the west is a triplex. It's got the R4 zoning, RU land use. It's a larger property, so it does meet the density for 3 units. Same with the one that's to the northwest. So there's 2 that are right adjacent that are or almost adjacent that are triplexes, but their lot sizes are bigger. So under the RU, they meet 3 units.
Okay. Can you remind me what the cutoff is on the lot size between 2 and 3 units?
So for zoning, you look at the R4, the lot size is the same for a duplex and triplex. So single family, you have to have 5,000 square feet. For duplex or triplex, it's 7,500 square feet.
Okay.
So this lot, why there's no zoning change with it, is the lot meets the minimum lot size under the R4 for both a duplex and triplex. It's the density of the land use that only reaches 2 units at the.
Thank you. I think that's it for now.
Board members, any other questions
I had a
for
question.
the applicant or staff?
First
member
of all,
Beckman.
kudos to you for trying, I feel like that any property that wants to be improved, it's a plus, not just for yourself, but the neighborhood and the county in general. And I see it's staying within the same footprint of the existing structure,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, I'm not extending or creating more square footage than what's already existing.
And the thing I was trying to understand, maybe staff can help me, is like, so I don't understand, how can the lot size allow for 3, but what you just mentioned, the compact doesn't allow for 3? How can the 2 collide when one allows, but the other one doesn't?
So the comprehensive plan it sets the policies, higher level policies, also sets the density and intensity allowed in areas. And then the zoning gets into the details of more specific uses, development parameters such as lot size, setbacks, and then down into details of certain type of uses. So the comp plan is, the zoning has to be consistent with the comp plan, which then in our county has to be consistent with the countywide plan. So that's the hierarchy of where it lies, where the comp plan policies are a higher category than the zoning category.
Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Okay.
I have a quick question.
Board member Hamilton.
Thank you. Does the county have any requirements as far as, the fact that, this property, the ground floor where the garage doors are, this was an auto repair facility. Is there any remediation required to make it a residential unit? Even if we were to recommend approval, is there any requirement for remediation since it was an auto repair shop?
No, the auto repair use was abandoned, and so we did find evidence it was abandoned, and a letter went out to the owner at the time stating that the use was abandoned, so it's no longer allowed. So if this was to, be 2 units, you could have a unit upstairs and, 4 garage bays for parking, storage, etc. You couldn't have a commercial in there. No.
But she wants to close up the garage doors. And as someone who owns some custom garage doors in my business, I understand, but to close that up, take the garage doors out, block it in, and whatnot, but there's no, because of the oils and everything from the auto, there's no remediation necessary.
If there's any, I mean, they would have to be cleaned up and,
I would be living in that unit, and so I am tearing up that concrete because it has oil stains everywhere. The previous owner did tell me that they removed the oil tank from underneath the slab, but quite frankly, I don't believe that. So I'm going to tear up that entire floor and start over. Luckily, I am part owner of a concrete company, so when it's concrete, yeah, I'm doing it.
Okay.
So yeah, no, that floor will be gone, and hopefully there's no tanks underneath. But if there is, it'll be gone.
I know I was down there and drove around the property and the neighborhood, and I noticed the lots to the west on the piece you gave us, the ones the furthest west are smaller in square feet, but you say they're triplexes, and as I drove by, they didn't look like triplexes because of the orientation of the building, I guess, but those are non-conforming uses, am I correct?
yes, and I don't know if they would have been legally established non-conforming uses. A lot of times, we don't see that until someone comes in and wants to do something.
Yeah.
And they apply for a permit, or they want to extend, add an addition on, or then we will look at it, and if we see, okay, wait, this is non-conforming, then that's when we take that look back and see if it was established before the code, if it meets the requirements for it to be illegally non-conforming, or if there was a conversion that didn't meet code that was done after the code was in effect.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Not at this time, thank you.
All right. Board members, any other questions? I just have a couple of questions for staff. And thank you for a very thoughtful presentation.
Thank you.
The questions might pop up, so let me just check with
Okay.
staff real quick. So, the applicant said that she's prevented from remodeling the second floor because she has to change the structure of the first floor? Like, as far as reinforcing it and stuff, do we have any knowledge of any of that of that being an issue?
I don't know, that's a building question, so I know that if it was any remodel, would go through building permit, building plan review, and they would make sure that there's proper installation to make sure the structure is safe.
Yeah, it's all hollow CMU. And so when I was, at first, I was trying to pull a permit for the entire building. And then when they told me that I had to do all of that, reinforce the structure, I said, okay, money-wise, I can only afford to do this one unit at a time. But then they also told me, oh, by the way, you can't have 3 units. And I was like, wait, why? There's 4 units now. And then that's when I learned of everything. But yes, I have tried every single way, I think, to avoid today's meeting. So I've read so much of your stuff to try to get around this, and this was the only way
Understood.
so far.
One more question for staff. Any type of affordable housing bonuses or anything like that?
Something explored? No.
Okay.
No.
It still
It wouldn't
not-
even
okay.
make 3, yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Stay close. You'll be back for a roundup presentation after we hear from our neighboring from your neighboring citizens.
Okay.
All
Oh,
right.
I have support letters as well from neighbors that I can. Yeah.
Yes, please
Yeah.
give those to our clerk.
Okay, great.
All right. At this time, we'll hear from anybody in the room who is in support of case FLU 25-01. Is there anyone in the room who wishes to speak in support of case FLU 25-01? Seeing none, is there anyone online who wishes to speak in support of case FLU 25-01?
No participants online, Madam Chair.
All right. In that case, we'll hear from opponents. Is there anybody in the room who wishes to speak in opposition to case FLU 25-01? I have one hand raised. Please come up, state your name and address.
Good morning. My name is Tony Clark, and I live at 4580 40th Street North, and I'm actually 2 doors north of the 4500 property. Okay? I appreciate everyone's time this morning in hearing me out. I've lived in this home since 1978.
I'm going to stop you real quick. You're
Sure.
pointing to a map. Are you trying to
Okay.
show that to us?
Yeah.
Okay, so
This is from the young lady that owns the property. Is that there?
all right.
So this is a pointer?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay.
You can use your finger, sorry.
Okay. So single-family residence right here, 11,230 square feet on the 2 doors north of there. That's my home. I've lived there since 1978. My parents bought the house. I was 15 years old and spent a lot of time in that neighborhood, that community, and consider myself a steward of the community. I've helped with a lot of different projects, street lighting, security, with the sheriff's office. A lot of time spent with county development, community development, zoning, and the folks at code enforcement. And this one particular property has been kind of a thorn in the side of the neighborhood for many, many years. I was the one that brought it to everyone's attention that the property was being used illegally back in early 2000s. That's when the single-family residence with the attached commercial building, the 2-story, was changed into a total of 5 living units at that time. The house and the original screen breezeway that was between the house and the back side of the garage was closed in and made 2 living units, rentals. And then the upstairs, they built stairs on the outside of the building with a cantilever deck that created another 3 units upstairs, which was all built without permits. So plumbing, all bad, electrical, all bad, walls, everything was built without permits. The garage originally, the 4-bay garage downstairs originally had stairs on the inside, and the person that lived there originally built the house in '54. He used that for storage, for auto parts and vendors and different things like that. So it was not really built as a residence. My main concern with this property is that it's just had so much bad history, but I would love to see someone invest in the property. I would love to see someone do something good with the property, but I believe that if it changes from 2 living units, which I would approve of with no issues, I think if it went to 3, it would drastically increase the number of people, the number of vehicles to park, and I think it might lead to roadside parking. And if you refer back to the photos, east and west on
And
45th Avenue.
just to keep in track, you're over your time right now, so if you can
Oh, I'm sorry.
wrap.
There is no street side parking in either one of those earlier photos.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to case FLU 25-01? Please state your name and address.
Madam Chair, David Lee, 4425 46th Avenue. I'm a resident in the community redevelopment area around the corner from this property. And, we welcome somebody who wants to invest in this neighborhood, particularly this property, which has been a nuisance. But you see the problem in the proposal. That's three bedrooms on a .21 acre parcel. It just doesn't work. And we know it doesn't work because they've done it illegally before, and it was cars everywhere. It comes down to parking, and we end up with cars all over the place. A lot that size just cannot support that intensity. And we have a master planning process that's underway in our neighborhood, not including this parcel, but we would welcome anybody to participate in that, where we decide what's best for the neighborhood. But three bedrooms on a .21 acre parcel, that's just not even in the realm of practical. And I'm really proud of the progress we've made in our CRA. If someone was driving there, I wish I knew it so I could show you around. We've made so much progress in the last 10 years. We want to keep that going, and this is kind of the transition area on 40th Street where the tide's moving in a positive direction, and we want to push these non-conforming parcels in a better direction, not a worse direction. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Board members, any questions for either of our speakers so far? Okay. Is there anyone else in the room who wishes to speak in opposition to application FLU 25-01? All right. Seeing none, is there anyone online who wishes to speak in opposition to case FLU 25-01?
Still no participants online.
All right. We'll hear from the applicant again. So this is your opportunity to speak to any of the concerns that were raised by the public speakers who spoke before you. Please state your name again.
Mila Ortiz.
Thank you.
I would say there's obviously PTSD with the other owners. The site plan caters to proper parking. I myself am not a partier.
Please address the board.
So there were 5 units, and of course the cars and the amount of people and the density in that one lot was probably too much. But I'm here to talk about 3 units, one of which I would be living in, and it's not. I'm a different owner, and unlike the other owners, they were not open with the city on what they were going to do. And so everything that I'm doing will be monitored by the city. So I'm doing everything to zone, and so all the rules associated with that. I am consistent with the comp plan. I'm providing more housing, which is what I think everyone here wants. And I mean, I know congestion was brought up in the DRC meeting, but I'm adding 1 unit. There's going to be 17 units triangularly from us. I mean, if there's any congestion, it'd be from there. So like I said, I'm consistent with the CRA plan. I'm providing housing. I'm not increasing the concrete footprint. I am doing this under the supervision of the county. So the county avoids and puts rules in place that avoids what they experienced in the past. And so, yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I have one. Oh, sorry.
Board members, any questions for the applicant?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't catch you fast enough.
Yes.
So, Ms. Ortiz, I think we've heard some really, really interesting and good information and detail. I think the 2 gentlemen that are your neighbors also brought up some good points. But the consensus, as far as I could tell, is everyone wants to do something to that building because it's an eyesore, and obviously, I love, you called it the purple monster. I thought that was very nice. So in keeping that in mind, is there any flexibility that you might have within the existing land use? Could you see keeping 2 units? But I know you said building larger units is probably not going to be appropriate to the market. I don't know the answer. I'm just asking, is there some flexibility or anything that you can see right now that would help you move this forward? Because I think the whole idea is a very good one and will benefit the neighborhood as a whole. So
Yeah.
you've done a lot of research on this, and I just wondered if anything popped out at you that you said, well, maybe that would work.
Yeah, you know, Plan B, C, D, and E. I mean, I've kind of looked at all angles. The 5-bedroom, 3.5 bath is probably the next closest thing I would do, even though there is absolutely no market, no comp for it in this neighborhood. And I have to pay off the construction loan. So they're telling me that Airbnb is the only, you know, I have investors, and so they're like, Airbnb is the only way to pay this off, which I hate so much. So that's one viable option, unfortunately. I'm also trying to convince my family, who live in a 5-bedroom, 3.5 bath up in Wesley Chapel, to move into this, and I'm trying to sell that, but they're not loving that idea either. But I think that would actually piss off my neighbors, because there's 5 family members, 5 cars. I feel like they won't fit in there. So yeah, I mean, 5 bedrooms is just not. It's appropriate in Wesley Chapel and North Tampa. It's just not for this community. I did ask the question recently to one of your staff members about going back to retail. You know, and so I haven't looked into the process of that, but, you know, renting it out to a coffee shop, but I still think there's some zoning issues there too with parking. I don't know, but, or glorified U-Haul storage or something. But I wish I could renovate the 2nd floor without touching the bottom, but I can't. That was made clear. So I have to do something with it, or sell it off. I do know a GC that's wanting to buy it from me and tear it down, but then I think he's now backpedaling because he's also seeing that you can't build a duplex bigger really than 2-3 bedrooms and get your money back in this neighborhood.
Thank you. I appreciate that input.
Yep.
Board members, any other questions for the applicant or for staff? All right. Staff, I have a question. I know we recently, it's okay.
Okay. Okay.
I will not hesitate to bring you back up if I have more questions come up. All right. We recently worked on a short-term rental ordinance, didn't we?
Yes.
And that would affect Airbnb, correct?
That would impact, and I'm going to watch Michael nod one way or the other as I speak. That would impact, well, one of the intents of that is to define what we have as illegal, you know, vacation by rental, Airbnbs, whatever you want to call them, or short-term rentals, to be able to find them and then regulate them, because the county is unable to, by state requirements, the unincorporated county is unable to prohibit short-term rental units. Now there are other regulations that are in place that could, that could prohibit them from a different direction, but generally speaking, the use of a short-term rental unit we can't permit, or we could not prohibit in a residential district.
If it was built as a 5.3, what would the density be as far as short-term rental units?
Short-term rentals allow a maximum, by the ordinance passed, 10 occupants. So there's 10 occupants for short-term rental unit. We now have it's a certificate of use process, so they have to register. They're subject to an inspection to make sure they're meeting their requirements, health, safety, welfare, that it's a safe place. So it's if they find something done without permits and stuff, they don't issue the certificate of use. So there has to be, make sure that it's safe. Any short-term rental now, there's now standards. They have to post information on, for the short-term rental occupants on what days are trash, what's a noise ordinance, how to get a hold of the fire department, all that. So.
Yeah, but basically because of things that I'm suspecting Tallahassee did, the whole maximum 10 people, restricting that any further or anything like, that's all done by on high and put down upon the county, right?
Correct. Yeah, there's only certain things we can change, and we allow short-term rentals in any residential district. We cannot restrict that any further because the state preempts us.
All right. I also heard the applicant mention something about corner coffee shop type uses. Is that something that,
No.
how do you even, is there a path there from here?
To have a commercial use, you would have to go through a land use and
So,
zoning change.
back here.
Except for home occupation. The state opened up for home occupation now. If it's retail as a home occupation, as having a home occupation, it has to look like a house, act like a house. Nobody can tell that there's an occupation going on there. So you see a lot of small businesses that maybe they're running a small manufacturing or something in their garage and all that, which is shipping out. But once you bring customers in, then you're entering into ADA compliance. So if you got customers coming in and out, then you have that. Maybe you're adding that ADA parking space, which then it does not look like a house. Then it'll trip into commercial requirements. So it's really kind of a fine line of what can work there.
Okay. And Council Morrissey, I saw that you took quite a few notes during the process of this entire hearing. Do you have anything you want to add?
No, ma'am. No, Chairman.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions for you, Mr. Swearingen. My board members, do you have any others?
I don't know if I guess it's a question I can ask, because, and I'm probably going to contradict myself as I get to the question. I mean, I'm kind of old school. When you say duplex, triplex, it's normally a one, maximum two-bedroom unit to me. I mean, because those units, not three-bedroom, not that type of thing. And, I don't want to get into site plan. That's not our responsibility. But, if it's a triplex and the units have 3 bedrooms each, in our market, I mean, I'm a restaurant owner. I have employees who, 4 of them will rent a house and, split up the bedrooms or whatever. But that brings in a lot of parking. It brings in a lot of other things. It's a difficult, very difficult thing. I mean, as you go down and I look at this property, given the structures that are already in place, if I was going to renovate it into 3 units, makes sense to me because of what's there. But how big are they going to be and how many bedrooms is each unit going to have? I don't think that's for us to decide. And I mean, it's just, an Airbnb, I'm in the tourist business. this location is not going to be real appealing for Airbnb in my experience. But it's really a difficult, it's a really difficult, I sympathize with the property owner and what she's trying to do. But is there a way to, is there a way to limit the number of, to me, a duplex is 2 units, but is there a way to limit the amount of occupants to each per unit? I mean, for parking purposes and parking requirements and things of that nature.
So that would, not from a land use perspective, so we can't impose those conditions on a land use amendment. Under zoning, there are conditions that can be imposed under zoning. So for example, the applicant brought up a nearby property that's R5CO, and that CO stands for conditional overlay. So through zoning, certain limitations can be imposed. The number of occupants per dwelling unit, correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, cannot be imposed on a conditional overlay. We can't.
No, but we do have in the land development code, so a family, we define, family, which would be per unit, means 1 or more persons occupying a single dwelling unit, so for each unit, provided that unless all members are related by blood, marriage, adoption, etc., no family shall contain more than 6 members. So 6 is the maximum unless it's a family that's related by blood and marriage, then they can have more, but 6 unrelated people would be the maximum allowed in each unit. So if we have like a group renting.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I have hopefully one last question for staff, and then I'll stop holding things up with questions. With the developer's agreement, could you restrict the bedrooms? The number of bedrooms on the property?
I'd have to defer to council on that. On a development agreement, could we restrict the number of bedrooms?
This board can't do that.
That's not our, no.
And
Not even with the developer's agreement?
I don't think this board could work through a developer's agreement.
Okay.
Maybe site plan zoning, your applicant has a point there.
Okay. The only reason
I think I see where you're going, and my question is, are we permitted, or is it within our purview to conditionally approve a change based on requiring a condition,
Yeah, and I remember the R5CO when it came before us. And I know we've had several developers agreements come through, and as much as they're a pain in the butt, they're actually an elegant idea, because on the one hand you have an applicant who's speaking to a very real thing, right? The Diocese of Orlando and Orange County have said, we've got a housing problem, we don't know how to fix it. And that's a thing that's throughout the state. But then on the other hand, our citizen neighbors are speaking to a very real thing of feathering in this change and trying to make it something that is predictable and understandable, instead of just surprise, someone's coming along and doing something bad. And change, if we're going to do change, this is just one of the things where it seems like a very thoughtful change is in order.
So,
And that's why I was asking about the developer's agreement.
So first others with, the conditional overlay, so which is like on the other property, the R5, and that's a zoning.
Yeah.
It's a zoning, not part of the land use here, and it's not been presented today. But you can't get in, you can limit density, but you don't get into the details of number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, et cetera, size of rooms. You can't get into that kind of detail. If there was if you wanted to look at a development agreement, it would be, you would have to like deny without prejudice, where if they added a development agreement, they would have to go back, start DRC, and we'd have to advertise, come back again.
Or they could, they're the master of their own application. They could continue this or defer it and then add the application and bring it back up, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And that could give them an opportunity to meet with neighbors and stuff, but
But I don't know how detailed we can get
Yeah.
with a development agreement, if we can. I know we have development agreements where we've limited the size of a building and it's
Yeah.
tied into a concept plan, but getting into the internal workings, I'd ask Glenn, have you
Yeah.
ever seen one? So,
have we, what about limiting square footage through development agreements? And I'm sorry, I'm thinking back to really fuzzy situations like off of Belcher or up on the south side of Palm Harbor, behind Innisbrook.
we've done sizes of buildings, complete building,
Yeah.
but we never got into the details of what does it look like inside.
Could you do sizes of dwelling units?
I mean, I think the problem that you would go into is you're talking about a single parcel with structures
Yeah.
there, as opposed to what one would generally consider in a development agreement, which larger sizes, larger units, different numbers of units, spacing. And here you've got one piece of property with a fixed footprint, so even if you were to ask staff to try to develop that, or the builder to try to develop that, what would we really put in it?
Yeah.
I mean, what we have is what we have right now in terms of structure. And it's, I'm not the land use expert in the office, but certainly it sounds very different than what a typical development agreement would look like. And I'm not sure that for the land use map changes that would be an appropriate or possible solution.
Well, I'm off on a tangent, so let's see if the applicant would even be willing to go down such a road. And the only reason perhaps you guys could defer, meet, talk, explore. She could make a full, not here in the heat of the meeting, right? But make a full decision on whether she even wants to do a development agreement. Maybe see if it's possible to tailor something that the neighbors would be able to be comfortable with. And staff could really think about whether that's something that could fit within a development agreement, since questions that aren't asked don't get answered. I'm just thinking out loud. The board can do its thing. This might be a silly idea, but it just seems like we've got people who really aren't opposed. It's just there's some fear going on here, and there's some desire for some certainty.
Well, the issue with, parking is the requirement for this, for triplex, they would be 5 parking spaces they'd be required to provide on-site. That's up to, the applicant to make sure that they can fit those on site. If there is, parking that's illegal going on, that we have code enforcement
Yeah.
for that, which is the solution, so you're approved for that. The minimum is 5. People can obviously add more if they feel they need to add more, and they can make more fit on the property. That might not be the case, but we provide, here's the standards, and it's up to the applicant to design their product to make it fit within the rules.
And I seem to have a memory of a developer's agreement dictating like where the parking was and stuff. So it might give enough. Am I misremembering? Am I going off on a?
It's a general,
Yeah.
so it's a concept plan that we have with the developers agreement, and they have to stick within that. Unless it's their specific wording, it may say, this is the amount of parking, you will provide minimum of this, on these locations. Now, when you get into parking, this is a small site, but
Yeah.
just any others, building code, site visibility requirements, fire department requirements. So they're all those that get into site plan that, get looked at. Building code, if they wanted to put more bedrooms in, well, there's minimum size requirements and per building code. So,
Which took me back to my question about limiting the square footage of
so
the.
they
of
would
the
have
units.
to be able to meet that. They would have to be able to meet any of the fire department, fire code requirements. So it gets into details beyond this. So here today, we're looking at just this land use change, which is a density. The board's not approving anything that the actual use. They still would have to, if approved, go through permitting process to make sure that they meet building regulations. zoning
Absolutely. That's why I was asking about a developer's agreement, because that's where an applicant has the opportunity to provide a healthy degree of certainty for the neighbors in these
Yep.
tough situations.
Yeah, and like we said, we've never dealt with that before, and that's something we would,
Yeah, you
couldn't answer that question if we could even do that.
be a growing experience. More research would be required.
Yes.
I mean, Madam Chairman and Board, the other, you have a recommendation to make, and then the Board of County Commissioners has to make a decision. And then after the Board of County Commissioner makes a decision, then it needs to go to the Forward Pinellas to make all the maps comprehensive.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether you want to start that, even looking at that process here, or start looking at that at the board, or...
Yeah, we would have to even talk to Fort Pinellas to see if that's something they would even entertain at a countywide level of development agreement to that detail.
Yeah. It just seems like questions worth asking, so it just seems to make sense, right? It gives them a continuance, gives them an opportunity to talk and see if they can if they can come to something that can work. Gives you the opportunity to research it, and it gives the board who, our elected servants are going to serve and make their decisions, but hopefully it gives us an opportunity to give them the cleanest recommendation possible. Granted, sometimes people just won't, they'll agree to disagree. So that's the reason I was asking those questions. Maybe I'm on a tear. It just seems like what you guys have is figure-outable. Sorry for using a term of art. And that there's some way you guys can get together and limit this in a way where there is where you might be able to get the density you need to make things work, and you can have the assurances you need to make sure things don't get out of hand, and that the community continues to move in the right direction, and it's not a free-for-all for people to just come along and do whatever they want in the future. But that's my thoughts. I'm just one voice on this board. Do board members have any other questions, discussion, or are we moving on to a motion?
I have some input I'd like to give.
Board Member Hendricks.
I drove the area, as I know some of the other members have. We talk about affordable housing, and then the very people that are trying to do that, we're throwing roadblocks in front of them. I've seen the architecture's rendition of this property. That area desperately needs some redevelopment. How can we talk about affordable housing and then we block a developer's ability to build affordable housing? And I know Ms. Ortiz has some letters of support. We didn't hear those. We heard from two gentlemen that oppose it. But I'm also sure there are quite a few neighbors that support it. So I think we need to look at affordable housing and walk the walk, not just talk the talk, and give these people the ability to do it to where it's got to be profitable for them. It's not a charitable contribution to be able to build affordable housing. You can't throw your own money into the piggy bank and not expect a return. So, believe me, you don't want short-term rentals in your neighborhood. I know, I've fought it. I live at the beach, and we've had a big problem out there with it. Though I don't know that that's an area that people would want to do short-term rentals. That's, to me, that's not something I would want in my neighborhood. But I think we need to look at, we've got to be able to help these developers within reason to be able to make affordable housing really affordable. And that's my 2 cents worth. I am curious as to how many letters you have of support.
Oh, boy, if you're going to come up and address, then let's have you back up and state your name one more time.
Mila Ortiz.
Okay.
2 days ago, I sent out an email to pretty much, I think it was half a mile radius, and I've had 6 letters back. So that's with just an email.
Okay.
So I plan to go. And then another thing is, I just signed a property management agreement to say that there are no more than 2 cars per unit, and that we have the right to tow anything beyond that as well.
Okay.
So.
Board Member, Vice Chair Cataldo.
Just a question of clarification. As on the board of the local planning agency, do we have the authority, or can we make the recommendations on what is affordable housing, or what direction things can be developed? Or is our position to look to what's being recommended for the neighborhood or for the area the property is located in? I guess I'm just wondering if we're in areas that outside the LPA.
So the county has, we have definitions of affordable housing that emanate from the state, and then we've taken those and have crafted them for our definitions of affordable housing. So we have those already. With regard to this case, there's, with development agreements, zoning, conditional overlays, how much affordable housing, unless council disagrees with me, none of that is germane to this case. I have no dog in this fight. For the applicant's benefit, my intent isn't to come to you as a bearer of bad news. I'm here under the purview of reviewing a future land use map amendment within best practices of land use planning. And that's where this has directed me. Those of you on the board who know me better know my stance on affordable housing and my stance on redevelopment, all of those
Mr.
things, but
Swearingen,
I'm
if I
not
can-
able to.
If I can just step in.
Yeah.
I am firmly of the belief that the Pinellas County staff group is, having practiced in zoning and land use across Florida and Georgia, I'm firmly of the belief that the Pinellas County staff team is one of the best in both states, and that you guys try to do your best with what you have.
No, I appreciate
And
that, Madam Chair.
It's also, we can only work with what we have, and you can only recommend upon what you have. So,
Exactly.
we may have an applicant who didn't give thought to the possibility of perhaps giving more tools to you and more assurances to the neighbors that could possibly get her there. But I agree with you, that ain't before us today. If she pushes forwards with what she has, we've got your expert analysis, we've got testimony, and there's pretty pictures that she's not bound to.
Thank you.
And I apologize for cutting you off.
No, that's just fine. It's at the pleasure of the board, so thank you.
Okay. All right. Any final questions, remarks, or are we moving on to a motion? And if so, I will entertain a motion at this time.
I move that we approve changing land use from RU to RM on the property located at 4500 40th Street North in Leelman.
Motion by Hendricks,
Second?
second by Laurie Johnson. All in favor, say aye.
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 And opposed, like
Nay.
sign. I'm going to say nay just because of my concerns about developers' agreements. So,
Madam
but anyways.
Chairman, could you maybe, so the
Let's roll
board
call.
reporter knows, could we do a quick roll call?
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Sorry, I haven't had to do this before.
You're okay.
So go through everyone for their,
Correct.
Matt and John,
Nay, and for what it's worth, because of my developer agreement concerns.
Stanley Cataldo,
Nay?
Carlos Brito,
Aye.
John Hendricks,
Aye.
Chris Johnson is not voting, Larry Johnson,
Aye.
White Hamilton,
Aye.
Phil Morrissey, not voting.
Ms. Johnson would be the last member.
Oh,
I'm a non-voting.
She's a non-voting.
Oh, you're non-voting member, okay. You've got all the voting members called.
Yes,
okay.
4-2
All right.
is what I have.
The motion passes. All right. And again, this will come back before the Board of County Commissioners. So that concludes the hearing on case FLU 25-01. Staff, do you have any communications for the board or anything to bring up? Are we meeting next month?
We do have a case going to the DRC, so we should, if it goes forward, we'll be having a meeting next month, yes.
All right. Any other communications for us?
No, nothing else. from
All
staff.
right. In that case, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Motion by Brito,
Second.
second by Larry Johnson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, like sign. The motion passes unanimously.